Okay, I think we'll just make a start. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's Muscles Matters 2021 online seminar on education. My name's Jackie Minot and I'm the Regional Information Advocacy and Support Manager for Scotland at MDUK. So this session will focus on primary and secondary education and how schools can support children and families of children with muscle wasting conditions. Building on the success of our 2020 series and having taken your feedback into account, the MDUK Muscles Matter seminars have become a regular feature in our MDUK's calendar. You told us you found the seminars helpful and informative, accessible and easy to attend, and a good way to bring our community together. They won't replace, but will run alongside our live events and we can host them again. We're running 2 or 3 seminars a month, focusing on a range of general and condition-specific topics. They'll include sessions you told us you found the most useful on research, practical and financial support, and managing your condition. Each seminar will include the popular question and answer sessions again too. Our helpline remains open and available to anyone affected by muscle wasting conditions, and do please contact us if you have any questions or are in need of support. We can help you with information and can either support you directly or point you to where you can get support. The number and email address should be on your screen now. You can call us on 0800 652 6352 or email info@musculardystrophyuk.org. Our helpline is currently open Monday to Thursday, 10 AM to 2 PM. So this morning we're focusing on education. Going to school is an exciting time and something to look forward to, but for many children with a muscle wasting condition and their families, there's a lot to consider and think about. We're very grateful today to be joined by an expert panel covering a broad range of expertise relating to education. They'll share information and advice and what they've learned from their own personal and professional experiences. We're also very grateful for the support of our sponsors this afternoon, PTC Therapeutics, Alexion and Roche. So before we begin, a note on how you can ask questions or make comments throughout the session. We have some advanced questions and we'll seek to cover these later, but we'd also like to incorporate some live input. To do this, we'll be using the Q&A function, so please type your question or comment and we'll feed them into the discussion. To help us manage the technical side of the event, we won't be calling on people to ask their questions directly, and any questions we don't manage to cover or don't know the answers to, we'll seek to answer through our website afterwards. And finally, just a reminder that we're recording this session and it will be made available over the next few days. So without further ado, I'm delighted to welcome and introduce you to our panel for today. I'm going to begin by introducing the panel and then I'll invite each of the panel members to share their experiences and any information and advice that they have. So to begin, we're joined today by Jodie Murphy. Jodie is mum to 2 boys, Fraser, who's 7, and Robbie, who's 5. Fraser was born with congenital Nemeline myopathy, and both boys attend the same school. And despite a very recent success in Fraser's support within education, this hasn't always been the case. Both boys have had very different school journeys so far, which highlights the hurdles and the difficulties parents and carers of children with muscle wasting conditions can face in relation to education. So next I'm going to introduce Karen Ho. So Karen is the Changing Places Manager and has been working with MDUK for 3 years, managing and developing the Changing Places campaign. So Karen is mum to 2 children and her eldest Max has Duchenne muscular dystrophy, autism and learning difficulties, and he's 22 years old. Karen has had many challenges with local authorities over Max's education and health support packages over the years. He now attends a specialist adult college 3 days a week. When not working with MDUK, Karen also works with another charity supporting families with workshops and advocacy support relating to education and the health and social care system. So we're also joined by Lindsay Mccarthy, who's our newly appointed Advocacy Support and Helpline Officer at Muscular Dystrophy UK. So Lindsay previously worked as a learning support assistant with moving and handling responsibilities at a school in Hertfordshire. Lindsay also worked at a school for 4 years previous, where she was the moving and handling assessor. So we're joined today by Mike Barnes, who is a SENCO at Large Comprehensive School of over 1,600 students. And Mike has experience of working with some children with muscle wasting conditions. So Mike's been in post for 5 years and attained his PGCE in SEND coordination in the first year of post. Mike was previously the head of PE faculty for a number of years and is a qualified teacher who still teaches. And finally, we're joined by Sue Manning, who is a care advisor based in the regional neuromuscular team at Leeds General Infirmary. So Sue is an occupational therapist by professional background and has worked in the care advisor role for 28 years. She has a special interest in working with schools, liaising with teachers and support staff to increase their understanding of neuromuscular conditions with neuromuscular conditions. With MDUK, Sue has coordinated the development of the original Inclusive Education Guidelines, a resource for parents and education staff. So now that we've had an opportunity to introduce the panel, I'm just going to move on to the first speaker, which is Jodie. Jodie, would you be able to share your experience of education so far, what you found worked well and what advice you would give for what hasn't worked so well?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you so much, Jackie, for having me here today. I am really honoured to be able to share my experience with education and muscle conditions. Fraser's experience with education has by no means been plain sailing. He is 7 years old and in primary 4 at St Francis Primary School in Falkirk, which is our local catchment school. Fraser started school in 2018 undiagnosed, so his difficulties were put down to global development delay. Fraser was identified as having a neuromuscular condition in 2019. However, nothing confirmed this until April this year, following a muscle biopsy. Fraser is the first child St Francis have had, to my knowledge anyway, with a neuromuscular condition. And despite being a huge learning curve, a diagnosis for us has been the golden ticket to support. Fraser's been really lucky when it comes to class teachers. He's on a winning streak, actually. They've been patient, empathetic, kind, caring, as are the kids in the school, very accepting, inclusive, just wonderful children. But in a class of 30, there's only so much one person can do for a child with additional support needs. And at what age does it become difficult for a child to count on his friends for support and navigating the school day because he doesn't have the physical strength to open a door? One of Fraser's biggest barriers to education is and has been fatigue. So I found it really difficult, and it's difficult for anybody unaffected by a neuromuscular condition to fully appreciate the impact that muscle fatigue has and just how different that is to general fatigue. The impact of a school day, let alone a school week on Fraser, is unjust and awful at times. It has an impact on every aspect of him, physically, mentally and emotionally. And at 7, he already has experienced burnouts that have taken weeks and months to come back from. Understanding and pinpointing the factors that contribute to Fraser's fatigue has been a huge challenge, and accommodating them has not always been straightforward. Explaining just how bad it can be to someone who hasn't experienced a child crying, disorientated and pain can leave you feeling a bit overdramatic. I reached a stage of reluctantly filming Fraser after school and sending some really quite unpleasant footage to his teacher, desperate for something or anything to change. This did spark concern with the head teacher at the time, who took an interest in finding a way to better support Fraser in school. We tried delayed mornings, we tried reduced timetables, part-time weeks. However, this really impacted the full family and compromised my working availability. I eventually lost my job to care for Fraser full-time weeks prior to the COVID-19 lockdown. He was struggling to even cope a few hours a day at school, and despite countless team around the child meetings, little improvement was made. And I was running out of ideas on how Fraser could be accommodated in education full-time. So COVID-19 lockdown gave me such a clear picture on just how much Fraser struggles with certain things that I regrettably missed while we were busy living life. This knowledge and insight, teamed with my newfound ability to discuss Fraser without crying, gave me a stronger, more specific ground to approach school with. And it really did help in identifying ways in which Fraser could be supported. Having an incredible multidisciplinary team of health professionals around Fraser who have dedicated so much of their time to discussions with school has been paramount in supporting Fraser. It really does sound so much better coming from anybody with a degree of authority. Supportive seating in class has been detrimental from an inclusion point of view, something that Fraser was initially not entitled to from a criteria perspective. The day his work chair arrived in school was probably the most rewarding day of my life. I am really passionate about postural support, and I always have been, and I have no medical experience, medical background, but I knew that Fraser sitting with weak muscles would eventually have an impact on his spine. So I was really passionate in preventing that rather than crossing the bridge when we got to it. Academically, Fraser is really behind. However, he has recently been assessed for assistive technology by Call Scotland, and this is looking very promising. Fraser accesses the entire curriculum through an iPad, and some of the changes Call Scotland have introduced, along with these wonderful teachers' initiative, has been so simple yet so effective. With age, Fraser is getting more confident at expressing and articulating his needs, and this has had a huge impact on management of fatigue. Fraser really does suffer in silence, and he will not draw unnecessary attention to himself. Simple things like flashcards on his desk to let his teacher know whether he's tired or not has been hugely successful. Having somewhere to rest in the classroom is really important from a pain management perspective. And optionally taking part in break times and PE sessions has also helped, because nobody knows his capabilities better than himself. Despite the challenges we have faced so far over the years, we really are beginning to see some light at the end of the tunnel. I feel only now am I understood, welcomed and valued as a member of the team around him. My intention has never to be that mum. It has always been just to get it right for Fraser, because I believe in him. Sorry. And I believe that with the right support, he is capable of being an incredibly successful adult. But for this, you need an educated child. My advice to anybody struggling with education, inclusion and accommodation would be perseverance, stand your ground and email everything, and unapologetically involve the health professionals as much as you feel necessary, because they too are equally as dedicated and passionate about your child as you are.
Jodie, thank you so much for sharing your experience. I know it's been a huge journey to get to this point, but I'm so pleased to hear that things are really positive just now as well. Thanks, Jodie.
Thank you.
So Karen, if I could come to you, please, so you could share your experience about secondary school, and again, what worked well and what didn't work well, and what advice or kind of guidance that you would give to people in that situation.
Yeah, hi, thank you, Jackie. Hi, good morning, and again, happy to be here and be able to share some experience and hopefully some words of support and reassurance as well to families that are going through this. And Jodie, I think you're incredibly brave to come on and speak about this, and it's a very heartfelt, emotive, and we know when we just think we've got the measure of ourselves to speak publicly, then our emotions do get the better of us. So I take my hat off to you, well done. So my son obviously is a bit older now. My son Max is 22. And his journey obviously kind of started firstly with his learning difficulties and autism being more prevalent and being more challenging in primary school. He was and is still a bit of a live wire, but it was the autism which posed the challenges for the teachers as soon as he entered the education system, and we kind of fought the system for many years, putting him through mainstream school, feeling that was the best expectation for him, you know, to conform, to do what's expected, to attend a mainstream school, to do what's best for him. But he clearly was struggling from the learning disability side of it. The physical side didn't really present for Max till a few years later. So it was the autism and the learning that posed the challenges, and it wasn't really until you know, the continual accidents and falling and the stumbling and the early signs and symptoms that, you know, that we kind of started to need to get some kind of plan together with the school. So I'll skip forward to secondary school. Towards the end of primary, we did end up exploring secondary school options because it was very clearly evident that he was struggling to follow the curriculum, the academic level. His learning abilities were very challenging. So we reluctantly looked around the secondary schools, specialist schools, and to be honest, it was the best move we ever made. I first of all felt that I was failing him as a parent by going to a special school with all the stigma and other things that were attached to it back then, but it was the best decision we ever made in terms of making him feel more comfortable, safe, building his confidence and self-esteem, so he wasn't having to keep up with his peers, which he couldn't do academically, and also he was clearly struggling physically at this stage as well. So the secondary provision we had, which is specialist, were very good. Max was the first in our area to attend this specific school, so it was a massive learning curve. And the best advice I can give to any parent is to establish these good working relationships with your schools and work with them, not against them, because they are equally here to support and learn with you. And many challenges and battles and fights and almost tribunals, but we managed to get there by working together and getting them understand, you know, where I was coming from, understanding Max's needs, because Max had the learning difficulties as well as the physical difficulties that he was encountering. So secondary school in education was a challenge for Max, because we then encountered the fatigue, as the mental fatigue as well as the physical fatigue. And the school were very good. It was very small numbers, which he coped with better. The whole environmental factors, because he has some sensory issues which were obviously impeding on his concentration and his ability to learn and focus. Timetabling was a massive issue, and because the physical side of it and the physio was so important for him, we managed to fight for years to get hydrotherapy into his EHC plan, and we were successful after many years. And I think Sue probably had some in doing with this, and Lindsay at the team at Leeds that look after his neuromuscular care to influence that importance of that he can't do the normal standard PE. He couldn't participate, he couldn't engage, he was a liability because he was always falling over, and he was at A&E all the time because he was stumbling and falling, and it was just safer option for him to be taken out of the PE equation. But then it's a case of, well, what do we do with him during these PE times, because he still was expected to participate. So that's when we looked at a program coming together where he actually then used the PE timetabling to access hydrotherapy twice a week, which I still swear to this day was fundamental to how he's been as mobile and has sustained his level of capacity as much as he has, because he had the access to hydrotherapy twice a week for probably a good 10 years. The school were very supportive in doing that, and also looking at working at different ways of including him. So like sports day was a day that he absolutely feared and dreaded, because it was a classic example of everything that he couldn't do rather than what every others could do. So the school really tried to work on engaging him in making him feel empowered and important, to have other responsibilities on the day, to be ticking people's attendance, or to be helping assist the teachers, and to feel important on some things, because we wanted to highlight the positives, like I said, and not those negative experiences, and focus on what you can do. So secondary was better than primary. Then Max had a nasty fall at the age of 15. He was still mobile, walking, ambulant up to the age of 15. He had a nasty fall where he had a spiral fracture to his femur, which did take him off his feet. Then sadly became very weary about walking after that, and obviously he had 3-4 months of non-weight bearing, paid its toll on the future capacity to walk. So then we had to make that decision of, now it's time to come into a wheelchair for his own safety. Absolutely gut-breaking, heart-wrenching time for me as a parent, and again another really emotional roller coaster journey. But for Max, he absolutely loved it, because he got his speed finally that he wanted. He got his wheels, he got his independence, and no one could keep up for him. And so we tried to focus on, again, those positive experiences of what that enabled him to do by having his wheels and his flash deco and his wheelchair, and obviously all the other accessibility issues that it also brought with it. But we've learned over the years to embrace the differences. We don't take no for an answer. We welcome the challenges now, as much as they deflated us and knocked us to six in the early years. We don't take no for an answer. And we went then from secondary into now post-16, where he's in a really successful placement with a post-16 specialist provision college, where he attends 3 days a week. a very differentiated program of learning, which is more based on his independent skills, and a few other things as well, because Max kind of reached his mental ability plateau, probably the age of 8 or 9. He's never really progressed from that in terms of his learning capacity. Reading, writing were always a challenge. He focuses now on his art. Art is his communication. Again, I think Sue's probably seen some of his drawings at the hospital in Leeds that he does when we visit. So that's been his preferred form of communication, and that's what we've focused on in his programme of learning and education in post-16 and secondary, is all based on his ambition to be an artist, and that's what we focus on driving, how to make that happen for him. And he's had a few very early exhibitions, a few commissions, which he's very proud of, but he also absolutely hates, because it means he actually has to communicate with people, interact with them, which is his biggest fear. But college have been very supportive in enabling him to take them steps to make that happen, which have included like a differentiated business course to make him understand the steps he would need to take to become an employable artist. Because when we looked at steps for employment, he can't actually go to a place of work unless that place of work is fully adapted with hoist tracking, toileting, changing places, and so forth. So we thought the only way of making this happen for him is to bring the work to him rather than going to a place of work. So that then has become our goal and focus over the last few years, is to find a way of enabling him to draw from home. So that's kind of where we are now. Lockdown he has loved, because he's living the dream of never having to go anywhere, never having to speak to anybody. It's his perfect ideal life, because he's not the most social creature at all. So he's loved the opportunity to just be locked in and not engaged. But then we've found ways of obviously interacting virtually, which he hates. He will still now just about tolerate a video screen as long as he's off camera, to have to then speak to people, which is not his comfort zone. But we're now gradually looking at interacting him back to college on a reduced timetable, as to how we feel it is safe, because whilst we're both double vaccinated, he's double vaccinated, he still does live in fear. We still kind of are in shielding mentality to a degree, and trying to encourage him and entice him to say, look, it is a safer place to go out there. He doesn't feel safe. He still sees the news, he still sees the circumstances. So the dilemma now is him getting out into the community, because he's far too comfy stuck at home now, and never wants to leave the house at all. So trying to find ways to engage him back into the community, back in society. He has got an exhibition to do at Christmas time, which he has given him some kind of lease of life to work towards. So the college are supporting him now on steps to take towards making that exhibition happen in a safe place, in a safe space, at his ability to learn as well, because everything has to be done in short, sharp intervals for Max to be able to process, digest. He's got this 3-second fish memory that we always wind him up about, that he's got a very limited attention span, so you have to catch the right moment and work with him and have a lot of patience. But he's getting there at his pace, and I am so proud of what he's achieved, what he's going to aim to become later on in life. But I think it's recognising and accepting that he will do this at his pace when he's ready, not expecting to fit into anybody else's box or schedule. That's been my massive learning curve, to work with, to work along, to be his advocate, to be his ambassador, and to make sure he gets what he's entitled to and what he wants, as well as finding that balance of him understanding that the whole world doesn't evolve around him as much as he likes to think it does. So to try and find that balance of, there's a bit of give and take in life as well. So happy to talk about the secondary post-16 experience, because it's been a massive learning curve. There's been plenty of challenges along the way, but happy to say there's been a lot more positives than negatives. So thank you for listening.
Thanks so much, Karen, for sharing your experience as well. So you've obviously, you and your family have obviously had the experience of transitioning from primary to secondary and then secondary to college. Is there anything surrounding that you found helpful, or that any advice that you would give in relation to those kind of transitions?
Planning ahead, just plan ahead and work together and work with. Don't expect and assume. Everybody's got different expectations. What people are able to do may not be what you want to do, within the boundaries and with the protocol and with the guidance. And understanding the importance of getting that content of the EHC plan accurate to reflect the changing needs, but just give time to plan and prepare and work towards, and to keep in regular contact. If you don't have any contact, then make contact. Don't wait and assume. I've always been a good advocate of, trying to make things happen and encourage them to happen, but in the nicest possible way without being a nuisance. So to work together to alleviate your concerns and reassurance, but also to recognise that, our children with muscular dystrophy are unique, they're special, and people do want to help and support and to learn and work with us. So to use this opportunity to embrace it and just work together ahead and plan ahead.
That's great, Karen. Thanks so much for that. So Lindsay, if we could move on to yourself now, and Lindsay's going to share her experience of her previous role and any advice that she would give to families who are kind of going through the process of education just now.
So I worked in a PNI school, which is a physical and neurological impairment school. And I was lucky enough to be a part of that amazing team. The school catered for pupils from 3 up until 18, so the early years right through to post 16. I was a learning support assistant and also the school's moving and handling assessor. So as my role as a moving and handling assessor, I would support new members of staff in all areas of moving and handling. So each pupil would have a moving and handling plan, and that would be include sorry, my brain's totally gone dead. I do apologise.
That's okay, no problem. I can move on to Mike and we can come back to you.
Yeah, can you come back to me? Sorry, I just totally got brain dead.
No problem at all. So Mike, if you would mind explaining just a bit more about your role as a SENCO and what support that you provide to families.
Yeah, brilliant. Hi everybody, and hi everybody that's listening. And first of all, Karen, Jodie, thank you for that. It's really actually very helpful for me as SENCO to hear what families are thinking in their experiences, considering I don't know you as a family, so it's a different context really from the families that I work with. So that's really good. I think you said some fantastic things. 2 things that you said that really struck with me as a SENCO in a secondary school, a mainstream school. And then if there are other parents out there, I would really advocate what you just said, was that you both said about being tenacious as your child's advocate, and just keep going, never, ever give up. The amount of resource and funding out there nationally in the UK, we all have a view on that, and it's probably a similar view. And to attract funding and resource for the children that really need it, and our children really do need it, you have to be tenacious in everything. And Karen, I love the way that you said, and maintaining that relationship, because there's just, as a SENCO, the first port of call for many families within a mainstream secondary school, building the relationships is a huge part, and that regular ease of contact, knowing that the child is at the center of it, not paperwork, not policy, not procedure, and it is all about the relationship. So first of all, yeah, being that tenacious advocate, and secondly, the relationships. And I guess I'll chuck a third one in. Karen, you said this one as well as Jodie intonated, don't assume anything. Really, never assume anything, even down to the fact of, what does MD mean? Really, it's so important to just ask the questions. So as a SENCO, really, the role is a coordinator. Secondary school SENCOs they don't have any special qualifications, clinical medical experience or qualifications. They don't have any particular information that is a specialist. They're trained teachers in a particular subject, and they've done a PGCE for 1 year in coordination of special needs. So hence, don't assume anything. And I would say what we can do and what we should be doing is our key role is to help share information, is to help coordinate meetings, to bring professionals together. And that can look in many different ways for many different children, because a child that comes to a mainstream secondary school with MD will have a range of experiences and a range of support people that are around them. And the sooner you can get those people together in team around the child meetings, Jodie said you had many for your son, the better, because you need to be able to coordinate and share information well in advance, because the NHS works slowly, education works slowly, decisions seem to take forever. So the more you can anticipate, assume nothing, be friendly on the phone, but at the same time, nudge, 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 and never give up, I think the further you will get, and your child will become the centre of the SENCO's attention. So I mean, those are things that are really important. And if you're not getting anywhere with the SENCO, it happens. You're not getting that relationship built, and you're struggling. You know, parents can go to other places to encourage the SENCO and the school to listen. I've just mentioned a couple of places, and I think most authorities in England, I'm not quite sure how it works in Scotland and other parts of the UK, can access independent advice. You know, you've got Bernardos that have send-outs. They're often commissioned by our local authorities to work independently of the authority to support parents, even in EHCP reviews, you know, just to be there, but also just general advice. And also when if it got a little bit more serious, you know, IPSIA or IPSI, however we want to say it, independent provision for special education advice are there to support parents too in terms of education and beyond. So, you know, in a nutshell, SENCOs are coordinators. And if the SENCO and the family can work together to coordinate physio, hospital, information for teachers, transition arrangements from primary school, it works well. And I'm very fortunate, you know, I have a good team at my school, and we have additional resource for children with a physical difficulty, even though we are a mainstream school. And I'd like to think that the children with MD that come through this place have a positive experience, but we don't get it right all the way. We do make mistakes sometimes, but if you've got that relationship, things can work better. I hope that helps, Jackie.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really helpful, Mike. And I think in particular, in relation to maintaining any relationship with professionals in the school and things like that, that's really, really helpful. And also in relation to kind of having a third party to support families as well. I think it's really important. You know, I know speaking from lots of families having to have those conversations over and over again, and you know, just the whole kind of system can be really exhausting. So having someone who can support you and help to advocate on your behalf is always really helpful as well. Thanks so much, Mike. Lindsay, is it okay to come back to you now?
Sorry, should we try again?
Yes, no problem at all.
Yes, no sorry problem. About that. Kind of braided. No, but working at my previous school, I mean, yeah, we were so lucky. We had a massive multi-plenary disciplinary team, and that consisted of nurses, occupational therapists, physiotherapists, the SALT team, as well as clinical support workers. So again, when a pupil joined Lonsdale, they would have a care plan. So that would involve all these people. And for myself, with my moving and handling, I would work with the OTs and PTs. So anyone that was coming from another school would have maybe equipment, or if they didn't have the equipment that they needed, they'd be assessed for the equipment in school. So equipment might be a standing frame, might be a walker, might be a toileting seat, yes, chairs, anything that would make it more accessible for them to be in the school. So again, with my moving and handling, any pupils that would to have had any surgery or any changes, then I would then implement the changes in their plan and then put that across to the class team. So the class team would always be aware of any changes, but again, with the teachers and the LSAs, they would know any changes that were going on too. So they would then inform the OTs, and the OTs would come to the school, I think 3 times a week. So even though they would meet annually for each child, that anything that came up, they would be able to resolve sooner rather than later. Because again, each individual might deteriorate differently, or if there's any surgery that's due, so everything would be accounted for and catered for each individual.
That's great, Lindsay. Thanks so much for that. And I think again, it just highlights the importance of sharing information amongst professionals and that multidisciplinary approach as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And I know sometimes you know, that kind of sharing information across the school isn't, you know, it can be challenging as well. So it just kind of highlights the need for that.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Lindsay. So finally, we'll move on to Sue. So Sue's going to share a short presentation with us about inclusive education and just explain a bit more about the role of the neuromuscular care advisor in relation to education. Thanks, Sue.
Finally unmuted myself. Hello, lovely to be here, thank you. So yeah, I'm just going to share a few thoughts and ideas from my experience as being a care advisor and working with schools for all the time that I've been in post. And it's an area that I've always been passionate about, because education is so important for all of our children with neuromuscular conditions, and with the changes that have happened over the many years now in terms of treatments and management of the conditions, and we're seeing our children achieve so much more and transfer into adult services. So education is just so important. So I'd like to just share a few ideas, which are all included in the inclusive education guidelines, which I was privileged to be able to coordinate a working party to put a document together with MDUK funding, and it is available, still available. We've now got the third edition. So it has been updated with more input from other professionals. And that was a piece of work which drew together health professionals, educational professionals, and parents and families to get their input, to try and pull together a document that could be useful for parents and schools. So this is information that I would really say, if you're starting that journey now from diagnosis or anywhere along, either with your child transferring to secondary school or into college, please look at that resource, because I think you will find it really helpful. There are other resources as well from the other voluntary organisations and charities which I use continually. So that there are things out there, so dip in and have a look and see if it will be helpful. Could I have the next slide, please, Jackie? So as part of that work, we looked and worked with our families and about just a quick checklist of thinking about schools. You know, it's such an important part of our children's lives. So my advice always is, when you're first thinking about a school and looking around what are the schools in your area, look at the written information, look at the website. Schools now produce so much information online. Have a look at what their policy is on inclusion. You get a feel for the ethos of the school. There's things, practical things like the school buildings and the environment. I know we're coming out of this difficult time we've had with COVID and the pandemic, and there hasn't been the ability for so many families to go and visit schools as we had prior to COVID. Hopefully now that schools are opening up a little bit more and allowing parents and children to visit. But it has been a real challenge. I've had a lot of children that have transitioned to secondary school without that transition work, without those visits physically to go to the building to look at the environment. We've done an awful lot via Zoom and use technology where we can. But for me, you cannot there's no substitute actually for being there physically, going around a building, having a look, being with the SENCO, being with the staff and talking things through. And thankfully, we are getting back to that place. I went into a school yesterday for an initial visit, a primary school, and it was just wonderful to be welcomed by the SENCO, and the parents felt really relieved that we could have face-to-face. So we are getting there, but it has been a challenge. So looking at the the questions to ask: how will the school support my child? What do they understand about the condition? And as we've already heard, being an advocate as a parent is so important. But don't forget, you've got other people there to support you as well. You've got your healthcare team, you've got care advisors, you've got physios, you've got OTs who can, their role will be to help with that education of school about your child's condition, specialist nurses. So please don't feel that you have to do that totally on your own. As our team, that falls to me in our team's role, but it may be another professional in a team where your child is being looked after. So the healthcare staff are there to work with school so that school know about the particular health needs, what this condition is. And as Mike said, don't assume anything. Many schools will not have had an experience, and then other schools may have had experience of different conditions, but not your child's particular condition. And as we know, there are so many different types of neuromuscular conditions, and it's really important that we give accurate information to schools so we can start planning and thinking about what that child will need. So communication is absolutely key, and also understanding what are the communication systems school like to use. You know, is it verbal? Are there particular times when they'd like you can have contact with the teacher? It's often different in primary to secondary just because of pure numbers. You know, a lot of informal communication goes on at the school gates in primary school when you go to pick your child up. Is it by email? You know, is there a system where you can have a little book to write things in, comments from home to go into school? Oh, you know, my son or daughter didn't have a very good night last night. You know, we had difficulties with sleep that might affect them during the day. They're going to be particularly fatigued. So think about those things. How can you communicate well? Also thinking about what will the pastoral care look like, what can the school offer in that regard. I've got many brilliant schools that really, you know, they've got their own school counsellors that we've accessed, they've got nurture groups, they've got social communication groups that children can utilise in school. So, you know, what's available in the school, how can that help you with that emotional, psychological support that your child will possibly need, and maybe not now, but in the future, and as maybe their condition changes. And how do you get to school? Travel, what are those arrangements like? And we've already heard about moving and handling and how important that can be for some children, and planning and thinking ahead. How we're going to manage things next year, what will be the change in the condition, if we're having medications, what will that mean? So again, it's planning ahead and thinking ahead. Could I have the next slide, Jackie, please? Thank you. So again, schools have to think about safety, risk assessment, evacuation plans. You know, in a larger secondary school where there may be lifts involved and different floors, you know, if we've got a young person who's wheelchair user full time, is that all sorted? Is it safe? Do the staff feel confident? Do they feel that they would be able to meet the needs of a student if there was an emergency? Thinking about extracurricular activities, trips, residentials, they're a big part of education. I know we've come through a period over the last 18 months where a lot of that has been halted because of the pandemic, but I think these things will return. And I know that some of my children now are going on out of school trips again, which is wonderful. But just thinking about how that can be managed. And I've had some really successful residential stays with our young people. Initially, the schools were thinking, oh crikey, how's this going to happen? But with the support of all the therapists and the family looking at it and planning it, it's all possible. Homework, you know, that is part of education, part of school life. But as we've already heard, and we know, our children can become very fatigued, which affects their concentration, their ability to perform to their best And homework can become an issue because after a school day and the transport issues, getting to school, getting home, they're absolutely tired out. So working with school effectively about that and talking about some of the challenges that there might be in them being able to give the same amount of time to homework. They may also have other healthcare needs when they get home, physical management plan, which impinges on them on their time at home. And they also, you know, children and young people need to have a break. They need to have a rest as well. So just thinking about those things early and having the discussions with school are important, and not letting it slip, whereby then, you know, it becomes a problem because we haven't thought about it beforehand. Healthcare plans are really important, emergency care plans, especially when children are on medications, thinking about boys with DMD on steroids, and making sure that the school have all the information that they need if there were an emergency, and they know what steps they need to take. And then I would be asking, okay, as we know, things always crop up in school, and what are the plans that we can get together and just sort of problem solve those, and how can we do that, and what that would mean? Is that regular meetings? Is it I can just ring up, or, you know, or can we think of things in advance? So yeah, just problem solving plans. So next slide, Jackie, I've nearly finished. So my key messages, which we've heard already, is building up that relationship with school. Don't be frightened. If you need support, please ask your healthcare professionals. Agree lines of communication. When is the best time to contact school? You know, teachers are in class where they should be teaching most of the school day, but when is a good time to be able to contact people? Involve your healthcare professionals. Think of support from your local authority specialist teachers as well. They can be invaluable, and use the resources that I've already talked about. And every local authority, certainly in England, I'm sorry, I don't know whether this covers Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, but we have what the local authority has to put a local offer, which is basically a resource of lots of information for parents of children with additional needs. And there is a lot of good information on there, which is not just about education, about social care, about respite resources. Use information like that can help. And just to reiterate what everybody's said, communication, communication, communication. That is the key for me. Keep those lines open between parents, school, the children themselves, and as they get older, they have much more input into their EHCPs and what their goals are going to be for the future. And let's just keep talking. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sue. That was a really good overview of all the different things that families might need to consider, I think, as well, you know, and want to put in place. And I know that you ended on communication there, but that was something that I'd picked up all the way through. What everybody was saying is communication's key, information sharing, and actually having those support networks in place in that multidisciplinary approach as well. So now that everyone's had the opportunity to share their experiences and their expertise about education, we will move on to some questions. But just to remind everybody that there is a Q&A function, it should be at the bottom of your screen. And if you want to submit any questions, then we can feed them into our discussion as we go along. So we have some questions here that I'm just going to put out to the panel. So the first one, Mike, if it's okay, I'll send this one for you. So someone's asked us, I've been told that my child is not eligible for an EHCP. What can I do if I think this decision is wrong?
Okay, so there's a couple of things that I've come across in my experience that can happen. Being told by who would be my first question that it's wrong. If you're just told by the school, actually it may be that the school are not aware of the level of need of your child. It may be that the child and yourself need to make sure that you contact the people that Sue was talking about, you know, the medical team that do have that knowledge and expertise that can persuade the decision makers that yes, there is a case here. And secondly, I would say that in that vein of never accepting no as an answer, the family are within their rights, within the code of practice, to apply for an education and healthcare plan independent of the school. Now, I know the system in England is that when an authority receives a request, and you don't have to put a complicated letter together, you just have to send a formal request, a letter. Doesn't need that much information. It'd be helpful for them if you could be clear about the diagnosis that the child has, and say, you know, your child requires an education health care assessment. That's what you're asking, and by law they have to respond. It's not seen as a wholly negative thing to do that by the school, because you're just being the best advocate you can for your child as a parent, and then I'd let the school know that you're doing it, because they're going to have to contribute towards the evidence gathering of information, but never say and accept no as the first answer. I'd go around, seek help from NHS, seek help from the authority and specialist teachers, and if needs be, make that application yourself as a family.
That's great, Mike. Thanks so much. So the next question we have, Sue, I was hoping that you could answer this one. So someone's asked is, my child is due to attend a school which is outside of our local authority area, as I feel this school is better suited to meet their needs. Does this mean that our local authority will not arrange school transport?
This is quite a tricky one, actually, because school transport is a bit of a hot potato. I think everybody's nodding in agreement, and it does change from financial year to financial year and from different authorities. What I would say was, if the child has an EHCP in place, then you're in a much stronger position. If the authority cannot meet the needs of that child within their school provision within the authority, but it is, I'm not saying it's always an easy one. Yeah, Mike, I don't know whether you've got any other, any other pearls of wisdom to add to that one.
You're right, policy seems to change, and I've worked in two authorities in this area of North of England. My experience is that children that have an EHCP and have to be educated out of area or out of authority, in my experience, the authority have ended up providing transport for those young people. Because if they cannot be educated within the authority, there's no school that can meet the child's needs, and the authority have a responsibility to find an appropriate education. So I think under that rule, that's how I understand the reasoning that the transport has been provided for the children in my experience up to this point. I don't know about individual authority policies, but if common sense says to me, if they don't provide the transport, how on earth is the child going to be educated? Because if they have to, the family have to pay for it, that doesn't seem to fit in with any of the equality legislation to me. Thanks.
Thank you both. And I know, again, we spoke previously about getting a third party involved, and that might be one of those situations where you want to get someone to support you, like an advocate as well, to kind of challenge local policy, or just to help gather that evidence and information that you need for transport as well. So the next question we have here is, the school doesn't always seem to have an understanding of the progressive nature of my child's condition. Is there anything I can do to help them understand? Jodie, would you be able to answer that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for me, my go-to would be the Inclusive Education Guide. I always, at the start of the year, sift through it and pick out the pages, the paragraphs that are appropriate to Fraser. I do not expect the teachers or the head teacher to read the full thing. So I do that, and I pick out and highlight the bits that are really specific to us. Feeling that, like I said, the multidisciplinary team, particularly physiotherapy and the neuromuscular care advisor, I think they regularly team up together and go into Fraser School and offer a staff training session, which is really informative and really helpful. Jackie as well has been incredible at getting schools to kind of come on board and understand. But yeah, just whoever you can get, not that they're going to tell school anything different to what you've already told them, but the authority really, really does help.
Thanks, Jodie. And I think again it highlights the need for that ongoing communication. And like Mike had said earlier as well, you know, not to make the assumptions that people have an understanding or have that knowledge as well. It's about making it really crystal clear for the school as well, isn't it? Thanks, Jodie. So the next question we have here is what could be put in place to support my child with fatigue management at school? Karen, are you happy to answer that one?
Yeah, hi, yeah, sure. A lot of this fatigue, obviously, you need to be looking at working with the school from a differentiated timetable or reduced timetable or a timetable that can accommodate and reflect their need. And I know we did when we went to secondary college with my son, because whilst it's a full-time program, it's a 3 full days which he couldn't manage both physically or mentally, emotionally. So we actually worked with the college. So we actually went 5 mornings a week to make up the hours rather than 3 full days, because we know he's better in the morning, and obviously afternoon he didn't have the ability, capacity to concentrate, focus, attention, and so forth. But also in things, you know, it's working with those times when they know if they're a concentration or particularly the fatigue, to have the opportunities to rest, to take time out, to sit down, to use that in ways of doing different things. I know in our secondary school we had some element of physio that was delivered to my son during the times when we know he was really exhausted, so he could actually sit down, lay down. His teaching assistant was trained up by our physio and OT on how to do a specific range of, you know, physio and programs on him. So we use those times to you know, to work on his body, to rest his body, recharge his body, to do his stretches, do his physio, and to allow him that time out to recharge his mind as well, because that's what he really struggled with, was the attention focus. So I just recommend working with a school setting to look at, in a differentiated program, to look at, they are obliged to be making reasonable adjustments to accommodate his needs anyway. So again, they should be looking at a differentiated teaching program and a reduced or a flexible timetable to accommodate this.
Great, Karen, thanks so much. I've just had a question come through in the Q&A there. I'm just wondering if anybody wants to answer this. So someone's asked us, or they've said, I feel we need to encourage school staff to explore assistive technology more. Would anyone agree with this?
Well, a little bit. I mean, this is a compromise. We found ways, again, because my Max was losing the dexterity in his hands for typing and everything. So we looked at the Dragon software for speech to text software for assistive tech support. When he was in secondary college, we looked at different programs. Again, it's lots of this is working again with your occupational therapist team to see if they can support delivering anything that can help support deliver what's in the remit, what needs more advanced funding, you know, get it in the HC plan, any equipment that can help support, and the benefits of that support to enable them to participate and engage. But it's finding that balance. Sometimes assistive technology could be a wish rather than a want, so it's finding that balance, if it's a necessity and need that can help improve and support, or is it you know, finding that balance, is it something you're more like you know, software equipment that, you know, you're working with the school. So I guess I suppose it's finding that assessment to ascertain the need and the benefit of that equipment is going to difference to enable them to develop, engage, support. I mean, different people might have a different opinion. I'm not sure, Michael, if you want to jump in or not, if I can put you on the spot. With a school's approach to assistive text, I know it can be very costly as well. So I suppose it's finding that balance of the necessity and the need, isn't it, to enable?
Yeah, I think you're right. It is to do with necessity and need. I mean, it's in the schools and the child's interest to get the technology right, so that the child can share the knowledge and understanding they've got to the best effect, because, you know, it's all about trying to open doors and not frustrate young people. Yeah, in the past we've had Dragon technology for sixth form student, and we're currently trying to train up our teaching assistant at the moment with I think a widely used program in primary schools. They call it Clicker 7, 8. I think we're maybe even on 9 now. In secondary schools, it's Docs Plus, which is a predictive text. So, you know, it is all about trying to find the right one at the right cost, because some of them are very expensive. But that's where the EHCP can come in, and the review, and knowing and doing your research beforehand, so you know what the suggestion is going to be and how much it's going to cost. And the school are going to be more likely to say yes when they know that you've looked at this seriously, and you can show that actually it will make an impact, because impact is what schools are often about most of the time.
That's great, thank you both. And I know just from my own perspective as a an advocacy and information officer as well, I always feel really strongly about assistive tech as well, and it really encourage schools and families to look at what options are available. I'm always really amazed by the range of assistive tech and software that's out there, and sometimes it's about taking that information to the school and getting them on board to look at different options. And I know in Scotland, I think you'd mentioned them earlier, Jodie, we have Call Scotland as well, who go into schools and do assessments and things like that as well. So I think a big part of it really is about doing the research and finding out what's available and taking that information to the school as well. Thanks very much, everyone. We just have one final, muted myself. We just have one final question. Lindsay, if I could ask you this, if that's okay. So someone's asked us, are there other parents I can speak to find out more about their experiences of education?
Yeah, we have a peer support group at MDUK, and it's run by volunteers who understand and have a personal experience with muscle wasting conditions. So we can introduce you to one, so you can get in contact and speak to them confidentially, and it will be confidential going forward. You can go to our website, and we've got an online form to fill in. So if you fill that in, we can get you in contact with someone, or if you give us your details, we can always contact you with the relevant information.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. And I know that we're in the process of kind of looking at more options surrounding support for parents as well. So hopefully we'll have more information to share about that in the future. So just because it was mentioned a couple of times during our discussion as well, to follow up on our inclusive education guidelines, Mike really helpfully held up his copy earlier on when Sue was talking about it. So this is the 3rd edition of our guide, and it's called Inclusive Education. Thanks, Mike. It's called Inclusive Education for Children with Muscle Wasting Conditions. So this is a comprehensive guide for both schools and parents, and it's designed to help meet the needs for accessible, up-to-date information about inclusive education. So the guide draws on a wide expertise represented by the members of the working party who generously gave their time and their insights to develop this edition. So if you'd like a copy, you can do so by emailing our info inbox, or you can also access the PDF copy on our website. So unfortunately, that's the end of today's session. I'd really like to thank all the panelists and the people who helped to guide the discussions with all their questions and comments. And just a reminder that you can see the recordings of all the other Muscle Matter seminars on our website, and the recording of this session will be posted there later this week. We'll also be in touch with a short survey to gather some feedback on the session, and this will be invaluable to us as it will help to shape how we do these in future. Thanks very much for joining, and thanks again to all the panelists for their time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Pleasure.
you. Bye.
Bye.